Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for the annual Galileo update. It's I must say a very strange time to be talking to a screen and not a nice audience of people with familiar faces that we normally do. I guess that's the current state of play at the moment.
7 o'clock.
So just to give you an idea of what's going to happen today in terms of the agenda, I'm going to do a quick introduction to the markets, what's happened in South Africa and the world over the last while, and then I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Justice Malala. And then I'll hand over to Justice. He'll talk for about 25 or so minutes, and then Justice and Theo will carry on with some questions and answers. So on that point, I would like to invite you to please ask your questions. There's a question or a chat function, Q&A function on the screen. If you can please put your questions in there, we will then pass them on to Theo, and he'll then fire them at Justice as we go. So without further ado, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining, and maybe just to give a bit of context to what's happened, I decided to write down some numbers which I thought just show how the world's turned. A little bit more than a year ago, we were faced with incredible uncertainty, both for our physical health, all of us, and then the state of the world's economies, and therefore the state of the world's markets, and that that uncertainty caused enormous drops in values for everybody. I think we dreaded sending out those statements at the end of Feb and at the end of March, because investments were down somewhere around 20 or 30%, both in South Africa and globally, and that was a frightening thing to see for a lot of investors. What was fortunate was that markets rebounded very quickly. In my sort of 25 years of being in markets, that's certainly the fastest drop and recovery I've ever seen, and so from that perspective, interesting to watch. But more rewarding for us was the performance, and has been the performance, of the JSE from the beginning of this year, and especially the rand. We've been saying for 5 or 6 years to all of our investors that you should not track what's happened in the past year or two as an indication of what's going to happen in the future. And unfortunately, after 4 or 5 years of saying the same thing, and the history repeating itself over and over again, we were starting to get tired of listening to ourselves repeat the same old tune. And so to watch the performance of the JSE and its recovery since then has been very comforting to see, and certainly in context, if I look at the JSE over the last 12 months to the end of April, it's up 36% in 1 year. Cash has given us a return of 4%, and the bond index 15%. Interestingly, the rand has strengthened by 21% against the dollar over that time, and so what we sit with now is that for the year to date, the JSE has outperformed in dollars. It's outperformed both the world markets and all other emerging markets when you measure our performance, as I say, in dollars. So it means we're in a situation where we're starting to get some of the payback from the JSE for the patience that we've put in the past as investors. And so from my perspective, very nice to see, but by no means the end of the story. And so I think a lot of our clients would look a lot like a typical balanced unit trust, and so I thought that was interesting to see what that's done. And over time, the last year, the average balanced unit trust in South Africa has delivered a return of 30%. But over 5 or 6 years, we're seeing a return of about 6% a year. So certainly we need to get a lot more recovery from balanced funds, from the JSE in general, before investors start to get to the 10 to 12% a year returns that we've seen in the past. So I'm certainly not saying that everything is great and that the last 5 or 6 years of terrible growth have all been evaporated. They haven't been, but we're at least seeing some nice recoveries in the short term. And I think for me, that's a comforting thing to say, because for the last while, all we've been saying is please be patient. The disastrous performance, below inflation performance of the JSE will turn. It has started to turn, and I think just to give that a bit more context, it's certainly happening in line with the recovery of emerging markets around the world, and more particularly the recovery in the commodity sectors around the world. So if you look at the price of iron ore, zinc, platinum, all of those, they're doing incredibly well. And so that's been a big reason why we've seen the JSE do well, and also why the Rand has done well. And then some economic factors which are a bit technical, but simplistically to say that we're exporting a lot more than we're importing at the moment, and so that the fact that we now have a trade surplus for a period of time has helped the Rand perform as well as it has as well. So what does that mean for the future? We've been saying for the last sort of 2 years that if your mix of South Africa versus international assets is out of line, be careful that you don't send out your rands at any exchange rate. Wait for the exchange rate to be in your favor. And at 14.40 or 14.30 or whatever it is right now, I can't find another word other than to say it is now favorable to send rands into dollars if that's what's required for your financial position. We have been saying look at converting rands to dollars at any level below 15 Rand 50. And when we were sitting at 18 or 19 Rand to the dollar, that sounded like a silly thing to say, but I'm glad to say that we are now in our target exchange rates. So please make sure that you get that mix right if you need to, but certainly we're not saying send all your money out of South Africa, that there is no prospects for growth in the JSE. There certainly have been, and we think that story might continue to unfold for the next 2 or 3 years. How that will play out, we're not exactly sure. One of the things I can tell you is that politics has a huge impact on that, and so we always like to get a respected political analyst to talk about what's going on in South Africa, because for a lot of us it seems mystifying, and so I'm really chuffed to be able to introduce you to Justice Malala. I'm not going to give the 15-page CV that he has got, because certainly I think a lot of us would know who he is, but for those of you that might not know him as well as we do, he is an award-winning journalist. He is I'm not sure if you still are a television host, Justice, but a television host, political commentator. He's also been on the other side of that as a general manager in business, so he understands this sector from multiple angles. And the last thing I want to tell you before I hand over is that he very bravely is awake at 2 o'clock in the morning his time, because he's sitting in Los Angeles at the moment. So I really appreciate your time, Justice, and I'm hand over to you. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Warren. It's great to be here. Great to be talking to all of you. Is everything fine for you on my? Can you see everything? Super. I have to say, when you say someone who understands these things, sometimes I sit here and I wonder if I really get it all. If you look at the events of the past past 2 days, you have the Secretary General of the ANC being suspended. You have the President being suspended by the suspended Secretary General of the ANC, who is told to sit down because he's suspended. And then I start thinking, what's going on here? But I think it's fantastic what we've seen. It's to me, it's yet another illustration that we're reaching, and you referred to this, Warren, when you speak about uncertainty and the uncertainty we've had in general, but the uncertainty about in our politics, the constant question, who's winning, who's gaining the upper hand in the ANC, who's coming through, and what will the impact of that be? I mean, if you look at business confidence, for example, and you track what the Bureau of Economic Research and the and other business confidence indices, you'll see, it's just been linked to politics, and it's steady decline. Essentially, what you've been telling your clients about about how the rand has been performing and the steady decline from, say, for example, if you take, let's take February 2018, when Cyril Ramaphosa became president of the country. You spoke about the rand. There was, at that point, we hit 12 rand to the dollar, I think. And that was part of the confidence that people had that, okay, we've hit something politically that's gold, that says something. But the uncertainty that came with, is he in power? Is he really in power? Are his comrades going to kick him out? Has seen much of that dissipate, has seen much of that evaporate, and people wondering what's going on now, who's suspending who, and so really this is the key thing, restoring confidence in the South African system. So I'm quite chuffed by the suspension of the Secretary General Ace Magashule and many other of the moves around inside the ANC and around its main leaders, because I think we're reaching a point where we will have clarity on who is in charge of this ship and what that means for policy, what that means for economic policy, what that means for the impacts that part of which Warren has spoken about on the rand, on the economy in general, whether we will see better growth than we've seen the past 13 years, essentially, since Thabo Mbeki left in 2008. So what does yesterday mean? I think the first thing about the next few years of our politics is to think about not just what we think of time, but what Cyril Ramaphosa and those around him think of time. I say this because for someone like me, every week I write in my column in the FM and on Times Live, I'm always impatient. Come on, do this and so forth. Cyril Ramaphosa, to me, and what his past 3 years in office means, is someone who will not act without being very sure that he is most likely to win. The past 3 years, I think he looks at South Africa and looks at the challenges he faces and hopefully he considers the challenges we all face. He sits there and says, well, how much time do I have to win this battle? And in my view, his battle, he believes that it will take him 10 years to get through, one, gaining enough power in the ANC to two, begin implementing his reform agenda, to three, weeding out the bad guys from his core team in the ANC and later on in cabinet, if hopefully that will lead to a cabinet reshuffle in the next few months to a year. So his view of time is that he's got not one term but 2 terms. His view is that what he has to achieve is not just in the next 4 years, in which or many of us are saying, get on with it, do this. He believes that he has to take it steady and win every little battle until he can really implement the big stuff. So what do you see with the suspension of Ace Magashule is essentially one big battle won for Cyril Ramaphosa, where the top 6 of the ANC, if you think about my analysis and many other people's analysis you've listened to, it's always been, what did people call it, the toxic mix, where the top 6 of the ANC had Ramaphosa, had Gwede Mantashe on the one hand, and maybe DD Mabuza or Paul Mashatile on the one hand, and you had Ace Magashule and Jesse Duarte on the other hand, and you had a cleave down of 3-3. Then you go to the National Working Committee, that's the top 25. Then you go to the NEC, that's about 108 leaders of the ANC who meet every 3 months. It was cleaved right down the middle. And most of those were working since December 2017, have been working against Cyril Ramaphosa. You'll remember, for example, the same Ace Magashule we're talking about now won by 24 votes. That position of Secretary General, 24 votes, and there were 68 votes which were there was a big fight about were they counted, were they not counted, and it was a whole disaster. That division that was so evenly balanced is beginning to emerge. Cyril Ramaphosa basically has, over the past few months, slowly brought the news closer and closer around Ace Magashule, to the extent that now he can confidently say, comrade, it's time for you to step out. And what you're seeing is the other 5. So it's Ramaphosa, it's Mantashe, Jesse Duarte, Paul Mashatile, Didi Mabuza, saying, out of the top 6, here's your letter. The 5 are saying, it's time to move on, comrade. And so you've seen him go. So what it means is that the power shift is happening inside the ANC, it's happening inside the NEC, it's happening inside the top 25 and in the top 6. That Cyril Ramaphosa begins to see that he can win. And so just in looking ahead over the next few years, I think you'll see Ramaphosa moving a little bit faster, but he still believes he's a 2-term president. And so when he moves, he will move very slowly. He will move in a way that when he knows he's ready to move. Over the next few months, we'll see. I foresee that in the meantime, the judicial wheels will begin to move. I think that Jacob Zuma is likely to be rejected by the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court cannot sentence anyone, so it's likely that they'll send the matter of Jacob Zuma's defiance of a court of the Zondo Commission back to the High Court, and he's likely to be sentenced to whatever the justices think, 6 months for contempt of court or whatever it may be. My view is that it's likely that Cyril Ramaphosa will pardon him almost immediately, and Jacob Zuma will find himself possibly stripped of his pension or whatever it may be. But the space is becoming smaller and smaller for those who are against the reform agenda that he's been pushing. So essentially, the RET faction, the Jacob Zuma faction, is on the ropes right now, and my view is that it will take some time. They will continue to fight, but that they are taking a beating, and we are likely to see them diminishing and their returns diminishing in the next 5 years, with the Cyril Ramaphosa faction gaining more control of the organization. Of course, the joker in this pack is that we have massive issues of unemployment and so forth. And if those are not dealt with swiftly enough, then we will continue to be who we are. And who we are is that, tomorrow on Friday we'll be worried what Moody's will say about us, whether we face further downgrades, what others will say later in the month, and so forth and so forth. So those remain serious concerns, and they need to be dealt with. But I think the political developments of the past few months are positive for South Africa, and I think are positive for us as well. I think that it's a step. It's a real step in the right direction, and it's not just the Magashule issue. It's what we've seen come out of the National Executive Committee of the ANC as well. So I think the crisis that Warren essentially referred to, the crisis of confidence, if you step back and take a slightly more holistic view, I think what we're seeing is a restoration, if you will, of some of the key elements of gaining confidence, of giving confidence to business, to the markets, to people like Warren to do the work that they need to do. I would put into that basket of positive developments, the very first one, and I know that a lot of people say, oh, where's Shamila Batohi? But think about it, just yesterday, excuse me, we were all sitting there thinking about, oh, there's 4 individuals at Eskom who were sitting in front of a magistrate somewhere in the northern, somewhere in the north, and they'd had 1.4 billion rand in assets stripped from them. They were sitting as accused in the fraud. They've lost their houses, they've lost everything that they own. It's been taken over by the state, and the wheels of justice are moving slowly. We're seeing the writer at Eskom being called all sorts of things. He's allegedly racist and so forth. Well, part of the problem is that he seems to be acting tough against corruption, and he has the backing, as far as I can see and as far as I've been told, of the president and those in charge, and they believe that he's doing the right things. If you look at SARS, the Revenue Service 5 years ago was somewhere, the legal affairs executive at SARS was held hostage in the boardroom by a bodyguard of the head of SARS at the time, Mr. Tom Moyane. And so you ask yourself, what's going on here? SARS is turning around. You're beginning to see, when we went into the budget in February, you'll remember that many of us were very worried, and I'm sure Warren referred to these things at the time in his meetings with you. We were talking about where's the money coming from, and lo and behold, SARS had improved so much that we had a little bit more in the kitty. I suspect we'll have a little bit more in the kitty. I saw Mr. Ed Kisveta saying, I think it was yesterday or today, that those involved in state capture, they're taking down notes, they're taking down the names, they're going after them. So I think the return of confidence comes from seeing institutions like that, an institution like the NPA being returned to what it should be, an institution like SARS beginning to act for taxpayers, not just for a certain clique where, Warren knows some people and so he doesn't get an audit, but Justice doesn't know them, he gets audited and gets hit. It becomes, it's no longer an institution for all, it's an institution for some. So, the Hawks, the SIU, all of them beginning to return to some semblance of independent institutions that we'd like to see. And I think those are positives. There has been a lot of uncertainty about policy. Why do we have uncertainty about policy? If you think about it, let's take land expropriation without compensation. On December 19, 2017, at the ANC conference, Cyril Ramaphosa wins the presidency of the party. Ace Magashule wins by those 24 disputed votes the Secretary Generalship of the ANC. But the key thing was that Ramaphosa had won the presidency of the party. And so at the very end of the conference, the so-called Jacob Zuma support, the NDZ support, then pushes through expropriation without compensation. And by pushing through expropriation compensation, they leave Cyril Ramaphosa with a big policy issue that they hope will trip him up and he won't be able to implement. Jacob Zuma at the beginning of that conference announced that free education for all without consulting his finance minister or national treasury. And so all of us have been wondering, where's the money coming from? Where do we get this money to pay for this free education that he promised? And so the key uncertainty areas in policy have come from those divisions in the ANC. People who supported President Zuma and Ace Magashule and others have said, oh, nationalize the Reserve Bank. And you've had an extraordinary situation where you have the governor, Lesetja Kganyago, saying, no, please, there won't be nationalization of the Reserve Bank. That would be a disaster and so forth. But then the market sits there and says, oh, well, it looks like these guys, we don't know which way they'll go. I think the consolidation of power around Cyril Ramaphosa in the ANC will begin to give us a little bit more clarity around policy. So if you ask, is nationalization of the Reserve Bank on the cards? And the ANC's head of economic transformation, Enoch Godongwana, says, no, it's not happening, as he has said and has been saying since that day when that resolution was adopted. Then you can sit easy, whether it's Theo, whether it's Warren, they can sit there and say, guys, that we know where the line of march comes from in the ANC, and the line of march comes from Cyril Ramaphosa and his head of transformation, and they're saying the Reserve Bank is not going to be nationalized, and therefore you can go and know that for sure this won't happen. If you asked that question last year, for example, at this time, we are in May, those questions were still being asked last year. Those questions were coming up, and the ANC treasurer, Paul Mashatile, had to come up and say, oh, guys, this is not going to happen. How did the evolution of something like so many of these policies, it was mainly because they were being used as political capital, that, look at us, we are more radical than Cyril Ramaphosa and so forth. So I think this will bring some certainty into the system. Will we have a state bank? I think Cyril Ramaphosa is likely to say, no, why do we start a state bank when we've got the Post Bank and so forth and so forth? So some of these wilder policies that came up simply because they were contested territory, in my view, you'll see them receding. So expropriation of land without compensation in a manner that is not envisaged by the ANC, or has not been envisaged by the ANC, but has been envisaged by the RT faction, the EFF and others, that is likely to recede. An issue like a sovereign wealth fund, when we have no extra cash to spend, that will recede. Something like nationalization of the central bank, again, that is likely to recede as power coalesces around these issues. A lot of people have asked me about a possible cabinet reshuffle. As I said at the beginning, and about how I believe Cyril Ramaphosa is running his administration, my view is that, he said right at the beginning that we will have a study as the presidency to look into how to reconfigure government and how we take it back to 27 or less cabinet ministers, which is what we had in 1994-95 under Nelson Mandela, and how it got to 32 ministers plus 38 deputy ministers. How did we get here? So I think we will have a cabinet reshuffle. I think that may be imminent, but it will largely be a consequence of a bigger restructuring of cabinet rather than rather than just I need to get rid of some people and bring in more effective people. I think you'll see it. Obviously, he needs to clean out some dead wood in that cabinet, and I agree with that. But I think it will be put in the context of we need to tighten belts, we need to cut down a little bit. Some of the policy issues around which I think in the future we may have to think about. I think NHI won't be spoken about because the money is not there, but I think that it is something that is central within the ANC. So it's not going to go away. You'll continue to see debate around that. The SOEs need solutions. They are a massive drag on our fiscus. I think this debate will go on. I think, Eskom, every time the lights go out, one is likely to say, oh, look what's happening. But I think the new team is beginning to gel, and I think that in the medium term, there's an upside there. One wonders how someone like the new CEO, the not so new CEO, takes a job like that, where anything you do, you're called names and so forth. But I think that there is the beginnings of something positive at Eskom. Other SOEs, I'm not so sure. SAA, for example, coming out of business rescue, it's still a tough call on some of those. Will there be a wealth tax? I don't think so. I think the fact that the minister didn't announce one in February, despite the push by Judge Davis, other people, I think that's a positive. I think that in the medium term there won't be an announcement of a wealth tax, but there can be a stealth tax. There can be your inheritance tax or some other type of taxation that we might see. But at the moment, no, not a wealth tax on the horizon. Local elections, Theo, I'll stop in 2 minutes, but I think on the local elections, I'm trying to hedge my bets, as you can see. On the local elections, I think our problem with elections in South Africa over the past 27 years, and our challenge with this local election on the 27th of October this year, is that people are becoming tired of the promises and are not turning up to vote. In 2019, we had 37 million South Africans eligible to vote. Only 27 million actually registered to vote. Out of that 27 million, only 17 million actually went out and cast a ballot. Now, a local election is even trickier. Many people don't want to be, in this year, to be standing in crowded queues and so forth, particularly if we haven't run a proper vaccination effort by then. And the problem with elections of this sort is that then whoever can mobilize their support to get to the actual ballot box is likely to win. The ANC is the party of all our parties in South Africa that has the most resources to get people into buses, into taxis, and to get them to get in and vote. So I think in these elections, and from the trends in by-elections that we've seen over the past year and a half, I would say that the ANC will be a winner with slightly smaller majorities and sometimes needing a coalition partner to run municipalities and maybe some metros. In that case, the party that is likely to be a kingmaker will be the EFF. So despite so much that happens around the EFF, the EFF may find itself having an influence on the ANC, because as happened in 2016, where the EFF could say, I will allow the DA to run Tshwane on this basis with these provisos, I think we could find ourselves in the same situation, likely with the ANC, particularly in Gauteng, being the one that is pretty much being told what to do, as happens in some parts of the Johannesburg administration with the EFF as a junior coalition partner. So it depends largely on the turnout, and my view is that the turnout will not be as spectacular as we would hope and would like it to be. So there is almost what you'd say a revolt, if only half of the people are turning up in such a young democracy. We're only 27 years old. So that is something that needs to be fixed, that we need to talk about as South Africans, all of us. So if you were to ask me what's my view generally, I think you know, the optimism that Warren expressed at the beginning is something that resonates with me, particularly with current events in the ANC. I think that there is real positivity in the system. I think the fact that the ANC realizes that it could lose the next election because of the corruption and so forth that has happened within, I think that has concentrated the minds a little bit better. I'll stop there, Theo, and we can have a chat. Thank you, everyone.
Justice, thank you very much. I think it was thorough and quite enlightening. We have quite a number of questions, and I'm going to try to bracket them together. The last point that you discussed was around the local elections, and there's one or two questions around the local elections. The first question is, what is the chance of the EFF actually emerging as the official opposition post the local elections? The one question's on the side. The second question is, in terms of independent candidates, your view in local elections and independent candidates, and I want to add a third point to that. We're seeing that very active campaigning, specifically in the broader Gauteng area, of somebody like Herman Mashaba. And I assume that there will be independent candidates throughout the country. So what is your view on the emergence of independent candidates? It is a local election, and how do you see that? So if we can talk a bit about the EFF perhaps becoming the official opposition, and then the role of independent candidates, your view on that, since that was the last topic we touched on, and that we are getting questions on that.
Yeah, I think Theo, thank you. It's a great topic actually, and it's something to keep an eye on as we move further towards the election cycle in October. For me, I think the first thing to think about, so you know, for many of the guys in the room, if you think about a town like Rustenburg, if you look at Rustenburg in 2016, Rustenburg was interesting because you had the Marikana massacre. Just 4 years before that. It was, for the EFF, a very good, powerful area of electioneering. They went in there, they went in hard, they pointed at Cyril Ramaphosa and said, this man is your enemy, and so forth. And what happened there is that the EFF emerged as the number 2 party after the ANC. And the lesson there, and so the ANC actually ended up running the municipality because it got the smaller parties to come in and build a coalition, and you had the ANC basically keeping the EFF out of power and so forth. I think in specific areas, and you have to dig a little bit further down and say, where is the EFF finding an issue and playing on it? So let's say you are from Pretoria and you say, what are the big issues in urban Pretoria, in urban Tshwane? and you'll find, let's say just north of the city or northeast of the city, you'd say there is a massive shack settlement called Nalmafias. Nalmafias is growing by the day, where new people are coming on, new people are being told you will get land, you settle on state land and so forth, and largely organized by a party like the EFF. If they can get those people to register, and this is key, that if those people can register and get on the ballot, then the EFF can emerge as a number 2 party, as the main opposition, or as the number 1 party, even if it can get in those areas where there is mobilization of communities. Can the EFF get people to go and register to be on the ballot? And this is a battle that they haven't actually fought yet. But if they can, then in those specific areas of tension, in those areas where they've made an issue, for example, when they tried to make a big issue of land around Alexandra Township, for example, you'll remember that the EFF made a big point of going and holding a press conference on the edge of Alexandra Township in 2016 and pointing across at Sandton Morningside, saying that is where we're going. Have they made an issue of those land issues in Alexandra Township? I think they forgot about those people as soon as that election was done and dusted. So I think the EFF can emerge as a main opposition in certain areas. If it played its cards well in a highly contested area, if it had exploited, for example, in Nelson Mandela Bay, the divisions between the ANC and the UDM and all the other parties, it could have come in as a power broker instead of the UDM being the power broker. But I don't think the EFF, and if you look at its record in the by-elections, the EFF has been the worst performing of the top 3 parties. I don't think that it has shown as much as its presence in on social media, for example, is. I think one of the key things we miss with local elections is that independent candidates largely don't have the financial resources that an ANC and to some extent a DA and even an EFF have. So the true independents who are coming largely out of the ANC and standing against a local councillor don't always have the money to mobilize communities. I think in certain areas like Tshwane and around Tshwane, places like where I come from, Hammanskraal, I think Hammanskraal, Harangua, Mamelodi and so forth, I think someone like Herman Mashaba will find resonance. He's a big figure there. He's a well-known former business person. He is quite a well-known. I think he's touching on issues where I disagree with him, but which I believe are real in South African households, and that's issues around illegal immigrants. I think that, he's made a big thing about that one, and he points it out again and again. I might not like it personally, but he is stretching a scab that in South Africa is quite significant. So I think he'll make an impact, not just him and a few others in specific areas where so if you take Herman Mashaba and his party, I think he'll make some impact in and around Tshwane, in some parts around the former Bophutha Tswana, the northwest bits, and has a chance to grow a little bit around Johannesburg. But I think he remains a pretty regional force. Most other independents will find themselves facing the might of the ANC. Now, the ANC might not be able to pay salaries. You know that there are people are sitting without having been paid last month. This is a monthly occurrence now. But when the ANC needs to turn things around for electioneering, it finds the money. And I think it will find the money. And I think this will be largely a money election. So much as I don't enjoy saying it, I think that the ANC will still emerge quite powerful. I think that DA will do well in the Western Cape generally, because it runs very well on past record, and it has done well and continues to do well, whether you look at the AG's reports and so forth, in places like everywhere from Somerset West to wherever in the Western Cape. I don't think they've used their platform well enough to turn a place like Nelson Mandela Bay decisively towards the DA, which they could do if they exploited some of the failures in those municipalities. So I think, yes, some success for the EFF, but I think it's very regional. So we have a opposition and independence that will do well in specific small places, but not in general. Yeah.
Thank you, Justice. I want to move back to the government policy, and we have a question, and I think that it is very important in terms of how strong the Cyril Ramaphosa grouping is. We know that we're in the middle of wage negotiations with the government employees. And if you look at the fact that the government employees, in terms of their membership of trade unions, that almost is the base of the trade union tripartite alliance formation. What is the government's position? And we've seen what Tito Mboweni in his budget is for, to a large extent, believe that they will get away with extremely small increases in government salary bill. Your view on these negotiations, and will government be able to hold its own, or is there or could there be a issue around this coming up?
Yeah. It's going to come up, Theo. Thank you. That's I hadn't referred to it, but it's probably the most important question for people like Moody's tomorrow when they give us their latest assessment. It will be a big issue for the next rating agencies and so forth, because government debt has gone from what I'm sure you know the numbers, from 60 to by 2025 we'll be hitting 80-90% debt to GDP ratio. It's a crisis that we have here. So any concession that Senzo Mchunu, the public service minister, that this government, that Tito Mboweni makes to those public sector trade unions is on us, and it will affect this debt blowout significantly. The government has held the line. It's divided on this. Senzo Mchunu wants to strike a deal, wants to make cash payouts to, I think the latest is that the trade unions have said inflation plus 4%, and he's saying, no, we're not moving, but we'll give you some incentives, we'll pay some of the money in cash and so forth. Cyril Ramaphosa, Tito Mboweni, a few others in cabinet are saying, no, we've had 10 years of just throwing money at the public service, we're not doing it anymore. I see Mugwena Maluleka, formerly of SATU, who's the chief negotiator, is saying it is inevitable that we are going to go on strike. So just in terms of who will hold out, I think Cyril and his team will push them to go to a strike and try to not break the trade union, because he was endorsed by COSATU. He has been, and part of his strength of his grouping right now is because he has been endorsed again by COSATU, going into these meetings about stepping aside and so forth. He still needs them, but he will push them to a situation of weakness. I think to the question, if you look at the strategy that government has adopted, I think the latest thing is that they've said there are three players here. There's government, there's the trade unions or the workers, and then there's the public. So they're now saying, will members of the public please tell us what to do? And I think basically Cyril Ramaphosa is putting together a dossier that will say, but you guys are inefficient. You have people turn up at clinics in Hammanskraal and get told that, oh, sorry, I'm on lunch, or all that stuff. And he'll say, okay, sign on the dotted line. We will do this if efficiency improves in such a way. So it's a public relations battle, but I think we'll see a public service strike this year, Theo. You know, we had a situation, if you'll remember, under Nelson Mandela back in the late 90s, when Derek Keyes left and Trevor Manuel came in, and one of the things he said was that we need to cut the civil service at the time. I think it was from 1.3 million to 1 million or 900 and something thousand. And we had big fights between the public sector unions and government. And I think we'll see a bit of that again, because under Jacob Zuma, between 2008 and now, the public sector has grown, and their salaries have really, you know, these guys were enjoying really above inflation, lovely increases, which we can't afford anymore. So I think it's going to go down to the wire. I think you'll see some instability in terms of fighting. Cyril Ramaphosa has said that I will preserve the alliance, meaning that I will not allow COSATU to walk out or the Communist Party to walk out. So I think the accommodation in the public sector will be we retrench some people and we keep paying those who are left the kind of increases you want. I think he's driving them to the point where they have to choose whether the civil service is trimmed or they don't take a salary cut, a salary increase. They don't get one either. Thanks, Theo.
Thanks, Justice. We've got about 7 minutes. I'm going to ask just a bit about a question. It seems that we come back to the fact that the Cyril Ramaphosa leadership inner circle needs to remain in place for us to be on a better path. Anything that challenges that will obviously be a major disaster for South Africa. I want to come back to that unit that needs to run South Africa. We probably a year and a half away from the next leadership election of the ANC, and one can make the assumption that there will be some challenges, but I don't want to talk much about those challenges because hopefully this weekend's NEC will draw a line underneath all of those. If I look at the Cyril Ramaphosa setting to putting up his slate or his structure for leadership, who is the strong contenders that he will put, that he would like to emerge as his top six, number one, and number two, who do you see as the next leadership structure that, or next leadership personnel that we should have a look at? From that point of view, we've got about 3 to 4 minutes, so just your views on that.
Okay, Thank you. You're right. So if he sees, so there's two elements to it. The first one is he satisfied that he's done enough in 5 years and so moves on? I don't think he thinks I don't at all believe that he thinks he's achieved what he wanted to achieve. So I believe he believes he's a two-term president. That means that he will fight off any challenge at the next conference in December 2022. Who are the people likely to challenge him? There are people who like him. This would most probably be their last chance unless they want to be running the country in their 80s. Cyril is 68 this year. If you take someone like Lindiwe Sisulu, for example, who tried to run last time round and fell out in the sort of second round of people, she was in the last 6 who were still running in 2017. She is born in 55, I think. So she's about 66. If she doesn't run for it and get it next year, the next conference of the ANC will be in 2027. She'll be well into her 70s. So there's a generational thing going on, and so that generation of leaders. If you think about Jacob Zuma, Thabo Mbeki, they were born in the 40s, early 40s. I think both of them were born in 42. Both of them ran at the same time. Mbeki won, and then Zuma came in. The next generation was the Cyril Ramaphosa generation. And that generation born in the 50s kind of waited their turn in the 1990s, and here's Cyril Ramaphosa now. None of those people in that generation are going to run this time. So the next layer are people like Paul Mashatile, who is the Treasurer General at the moment. The next layer is someone who sees himself in the position like David Mabuza. David Mabuza's big play was that, remember, Jacob Zuma said, I'm the deputy president of the ANC. In the ANC culture, the deputy president comes in after the current president. So he moved into that slot. He can afford to wait one more term if Cyril goes for it. But he will want some concessions that, look, when you go, I go. Cyril would not prefer to have David Mabuza as his successor, because he is not quite convinced by the ethos, if you will, in my view, of the gentleman. Someone who wants to position himself for that position is Paul Mashatile, who doesn't want to end up being the person who became a Treasurer General and stopped. Another person who fences that position is Zweli Mkhize, who was in the running last time around, but Zweli is of that generation around Cyril's age. I think he's slightly younger. So I would say for the next iteration, I would say next December, Cyril Ramaphosa stays president. I think he's building a strong second term run. The 2027 lot is between David Mabuza, Paul Mashatile, and a few who might emerge a little bit later. Are they my ideal candidates? I suspect that people like the Gauteng Premier think that that layer should not even get a look in, and that a younger set of 40-something-year-olds at the moment should be the ones who are being thought about to succeed Ramaphosa in 2027. That said, my view is that the ANC is not going to get another term after Ramaphosa's. I think that in 2029, in a free and fair election, I think that South Africans will vote for an opposition party. And I think that in 2024, in fact, that we may have what we're saying now about the contest in the local elections. I think it will become a serious contest for the ANC in 2024.
I want to take that point. I know we technically over time, but I want to take that point one step further. 2024, 2029, if you talk about opposition politics and meaning that the ANC will face serious challenges, which side of the ANC would you see that? Because kind of we have the more, let's say, the RET faction, and then you have the EFF, and on the other side you move towards, let's say, the Tito Mboweni side of the party, the Cyril Ramaphosa side of the party, and then you move into COPE and the DA in that direction. If you talk about opposition and where the pendulum will move towards 2024 and then 2029, how do you see that?
I see the pendulum moving towards the Ramaphosa faction. I see it emerging victorious but bloodied by the internal fighting. I think then that faction will need to, I think that infighting will damage its 57% as of 2019, will go down a little bit more, and might be at 52 or might even be a bit lower. And that is when we're going to, or the ANC will seriously need to start talking to parts of the liberal, if you will, because the ANC hates the word. But my view is that the Ramaphosa, the Tito Mboweni is a sort of social democrat to liberal formation, and it will need to start speaking to the UDM, to the DA even, to other parts of the liberal opposition, because there is a conversation, certainly whether it's the so-called Nkandla Tea Party that's happening on the other side. The EFF is talking to Jacob Zuma, will be talking to others like the Ace Mahashules, and will welcome them if they bring a constituency. So I think there will be a reset of our politics in that period post or around 2024 and that national election.
Justice, thank you very much. I'll see our hour is actually up. We're already 2 minutes over time. I just want to thank you for your time. And I'm going to allow you perhaps a minute or two, just closing remarks. And the closing remarks I want you to touch on in terms of where we are today, where we were 5 years ago and where we were in 10 years' time. How do you feel about South Africa for us in South Africa, making a future in South Africa? What is your view if you were to take the temperature, let's say 5 years ago, today, and in 5 years' time?
Theo, thank you. That's a great question. For me, I wrote a book 5 years ago, and thank you to all your clients who bought it. It was called "We Have Now Begun Our Descent." And it was about, it was my views on where we were in 2015, 2016. And it was a very pessimistic view, because I think what we went through between 2007 December, when Jacob Zuma became president of the ANC, and 2017 when he was ousted, were a dark period. State capture was horrific. Lack of action on key issues by that government was horrific. So I'm an admirer of Cyril Ramaphosa, but I haven't drunk all of his Kool-Aid, and I'm not one to overlike politicians, because they tend to disappoint you almost inevitably. However, we are, and I think with him becoming a bit stronger in his party, we are in a much better place. And I can argue the point all day and all night with anyone who wants to say to have this debate. We are in a far better place than we were 10 years ago. I think that, who said democracy, the gift of democracy is eternal vigilance. I think something along those lines, and I think that's what all of us South Africans need to realize it's going to be a battle to keep the state coffers away from those people who wanted to achieve what they wanted to achieve in those 10 years. So they're not gone. Ace Magashule is not gone. This battle will continue. But I think we are in a better state, and I think we'll see some confidence return quite powerfully to the system. My view is that you know, some of the points that weren't made about what that return to confidence has meant. I think if we get the vaccination process right and we bring in the private sector, private medical aids to help government inoculate people, I think we can really return to a vibrant economy, maybe not the 6% growth we saw in 2005, which I'd love to see, but maybe we can return to a decent 3% soon enough, and maybe 4 or 5%. That would be fantastic. But in terms of the political stuff, you know, civil society bodies, your South African Council of Churches, your outers need to continue with their voices. That's how we got the state capture group out, and we can't stop those things now. So I'm an optimist at the moment. I think that the ideals of those who are gaining an upper hand in the ANC are the sort of ideals I think many of us hoped for in 1994. So slightly better, slightly more optimistic now than I was 10 years ago, and slightly more optimistic about the future.
Thank you very much, Justice Malala. Thank you for sharing the last almost an hour with us. And for those on the line, those that listened, I think that was very insightful. I think it is to an extent, and I must say we haven't talked before this discussion. We haven't checked notes, but I think to a large extent that is in line of our thinking and what we've been telling clients. So let's hold thumbs. Let's hope that everything works out and that the Cyril Ramaphosa faction holds sway, which I share with you. From my side, to all our clients out there, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found it as informative as I did, and we thank you for your time, and we thank you for your trust in us, and we thank you for allowing us to assist you on your path to your financial goals. So to end off, Justice, thank you very much for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Everybody out there, thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that you got the same amount of value out of this that we did. Thank you very much and all the best.